stay on.
All right. Monday, July 29th, street committee meeting. Call it to order at 5 o'clock. If we'll stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Hoskinson, if you could take a roll, please.
Carter,
Here.
Powell,
Here.
Hayes,
Here. Alrighty. So Alan and I met last week and kind of went over everything from the previous meeting, and he narrowed down the things that he really thought that we should discuss this evening. So I'm gonna let him just kind of take it away and we'll go from there.
Okay, first item would be the 2020 ramp, so the ramp for next year. At the last meeting, I threw out about 15 different streets as potentials. So I've highlighted a few of those out of mine. I haven't had an opportunity to put any numbers to those yet, but I guess I'm curious if there's any input on which of those streets we think are higher priority. I can certainly give you mine, but was looking for any feedback on that, I guess, first.
Out of those 15, it's in the packet from last time?
I think I gave a printout of just that one page that had 15 streets on it from last time. I
Okay,
did
is
not
that the
print
one that
out
says
again.
crack seal list, or?
No, that's a different one. It's not in this packet.
Oh, okay, so it was last.
time. I think I put that in there last time. I hope I did.
Probably.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, go right ahead. Oh, here, there you
I think, do you try to pick a road or two in every ward, like you try to like spread it out? Did I hear you say that once? As
In
far as-
general, I mean, I'm looking for.
Unless you're just going straight for like, from worst down.
I rank them in priority from, the time frame and the condition, but then try and spread that out as much as we can.
What about little chunks, or like I noticed that like High Street by the school, Pataskala, is really bad.
Yes.
And I don't know where that I don't see it on here, so is that something that, because like from the tracks to Mill, seems to like the edge parts of the road, things like that, that's really rough. Like where does that fall when it doesn't meet this list?
So I guess there's three things specifically with High Street. One would be, I have Downtown Street identified as number 15 on the list for next year. High Street might be a good candidate for that. The second thing would be, I wanna do something to High Street, something minimal within the next few years, because it is getting in pretty bad shape. But the third thing would be, kind of more of a complete street kind of idea, where we take High Street. The drainage at High Street and Broadway is really not that great.
Right.
Ideally, what we would do to fix that is lower the street and put in curb and gutter, and at the same time, work with the utility department to put in sanitary, water, and then of course storm
So
sewer
you just to
ourselves.
patch it up now until you have the funding to,
Patch it up now, within the next couple of years to hold it over for the next 5 to 8 years, and then try and build that into the CIP for a complete street scenario. Because
all right,
we can repair it now, or we could, do all new paving, but within another 5 to 7 years, it's
gonna
gonna be
be
in the same
ripped.
condition until.
well, if you would consider it for some type of, I don't know, patchwork, because
Okay.
it's kind of a hot mess. Thank you.
Alan, is it something that we could do a little bit of in-house now I haven't been on High Street and looked at it, or is it one of those numbers that is just too much and?
It would, well, I guess a quilt is what came to mind when if we tried to do it ourselves.
I gotcha.
Our capabilities to do large areas is not that great. We can do
Okay.
small areas nicely, and a couple feet wide for 100 foot long, and do a couple of those, but I don't think that's gonna go very far on High Street.
Okay.
I know, speaking of High Street, a couple days ago on the way home from work, I drove by a house on Broadway and I kind of cut back through the school parking lot and came out on High Street. And right there in front of the entryway off of High Street, there's some big holes that I think would be worth filling at least before school starts,
Okay.
if that's possible.
And,
Yeah, I
and
think
who,
that's-
I think I remember this answer as far as the alley, do we share that with the school district since it's their busing route, like they take their buses up there?
I know we talked about that, I think it's ours,
Yeah.
100% ours at this point is what I believe.
Cause I remember there was like a pothole there, it was like this sinkhole that when I was working there, it was
Yeah.
like the magic hole that just kept coming back. But I think it is yours, ours, but I think we talked about sharing some type of financial partnership with the school since they were running buses.
And I remember some discussion, but I don't remember a resolution
Right, I don't
to
either.
that.
Anyway, there it is.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the only, I mean, I know Pat Haven Drive needs attention.
Yep.
Pretty
So-
much.
And since we're cutting down it this year for Oak Meadow, that one is highlighted for me as a high
Yeah.
priority.
So that was my thinking behind that.
Okay,
Especially, I mean, I don't know what the future of that, of the strip up there is, but I think, you know, because people do utilize that, you know, especially that front half of Pat Haven Drive. And I know that as long as my parents have lived there, I've lived there, I don't think it's ever seen anything more than, you know, potholes filled and that kind of thing. It's just, and of course, you know, those patches only work so long, so,
Yeah, I know.
very true.
yeah.
I don't so much.
And specifically for Pat Haven Drive, the non-curved section will be pretty easy. The curved section, the curb is in poor to fair shape. If we try to replace the curb, it's gonna get really expensive. One option might be to pave into the gutter, which is not my favorite solution, but will serve to, you know, buy us some time, on that road. So we'll definitely look at that a little bit more, but just throwing out what we're looking at there. I'm trying not to do the curbs because it's gonna take a lot more money.
And then my other one, and I've talked about this one a bunch, but, obviously,
But
Sorry, I'm jumping, thanks for
I
getting.
thought your cushion slipped. Is Cleveland Road. Cleveland is not good. And so, and I've noticed especially, with kids back and forth, where the sidewalk is phenomenal now, at least having the sidewalk up to, Monarch. But after that, there's still the kids on the street and the edges have deteriorated so bad that if you try to get close to the edge and it catches your tire, you kind of, you know, you almost feel like you need to stop. Because you don't know if it's, you know, you're gonna lose a little bit of control when you hit the edges of that roadway. And
Okay,
I know that the residents, along that roadway aren't very happy either.
okay.
We have something good to go on. That's exciting.
Did you have other thoughts other than those two, Alan? What were you?
Yes, so mine, a couple of these, I guess, speaking of Cleveland Road specifically, I agree that something does need to be done. A couple of these other ones are, I think if we do something now, they will last longer. Whereas Cleveland Road is a little bit lower because I think the problems exist out there, it's not gonna get a whole lot worse. And a couple of these other ones, I fear it might get worse and end up costing more money in the long run. So
Okay.
Cleveland is maybe a year or so out for me.
Okay.
These are the ones that I have highlighted. Creek Road, basically as soon as you cross the bridge, heading south to the city limit is a lot of potholes on that and it's getting in pretty bad shape. So we could probably do some repair and maybe even put a chip seal on that.
Creek is bad, yeah.
Blacks Road, from Township to the east is starting to get in pretty bad condition, a lot of cracks and a number of potholes in that. Mill Street from Maine to Columbia, that's kind of a similar one to Creek Road where, they're both kind of narrow, the edges are bad, a lot of dips and shimmies and whatever else you wanna call them. Columbia Road, pretty much the entire length of Columbia Road. If I can do a little bit of repair and probably put a double chip seal on all of Columbia Road, that's gonna help that one last, a good while into the future. Those were the ones that I have highlighted as some of my preferences, I guess, for next year and just what needs to be done.
No, I think that's a good list. And Columbia has had over the years a lot of crack ceiling on it, so, I mean, you could, it's past the point of that,
Yes.
so I would agree, so I think I have no arguments with that at all, you guys?
No.
Okay.
Solid.
So for the next meeting, as far as the ramp, I'll try and put together, costs associated with those ones we've talked about, see where we land, and see what else we might be able to fit in, or, have some discussions on it. I'll try and put costs to all of these, that way we can, mix and match as we will. Try and do that for the next meeting. As far as schedule on the ramp, we had a few we did an RFQ in 2018, we had 3 submittals on that. We were looking, GPD did this year, and they did a really good job. BJ and I were talking about, just going with GPD again for next year, and then putting out an RFQ next year to kind of do the same thing for the next few years. Just cause we're getting, with all the other projects, we're getting kind of late in the year again, and, really kind of need to get engineering started on that to stay with a good bid schedule. So I guess, any input on that?
And I think you and I had a discussion about this, maybe it was on another project we were talking about, but that it helps you to work with the same engineer a couple of years in a row,
It does.
so to work through some projects, so as long as we're, you know, doing it every couple of years, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Are you guys, is that shared opinion, cause I wanna do the right thing, but I also wanna do what makes most sense and cost effective and can get us the furthest distance in the shortest amount of time, so.
Yeah, that certainly helps for efficiency.
Perfect.
The only other thing I had on that was the budget for next year for the ramp. I've penciled in, 700,000 to $1 million. So the more we can do, the better on that front, but obviously we're also constrained by our resources, so.
Right.
That's all I had for the ramp. Is anything
Okay.
else? Okay.
Nope, I think that's good.
Taylor Road Drainage Project. This is the one where I had scoped $15,000 for design for this year. And we had Strand kind of slated to do that. Their proposal ended up being $40,000. So we got 2 other proposals, one from Hull and one from American Structure Point. Hull actually did, after Structure Point made some adjustments, Hull was actually low, but with Hull's workload and the other things that we have doing for us, Structure Point was just a little bit higher. We haven't used Structure Point, we've been trying to get them in the game. They've done a couple of reviews for us on different subdivisions and did a really good job. So BJ and I were talking about that, and we'd like to go with American Structure Point for this design.
And what was their cost?
$32,000. Hull was at $30,500. So
Okay.
they were slightly lower, but like I said, we're trying to get Structure Point involved, get other engineers involved. Hull would be doing the review as part of the engineering retainer in that scenario.
So the supplemental for this one, is that next council meeting? Cause we only have 15 allowed, right?
There would not need to be a supplemental. There's savings within the other
Within
outside
the other
engineering
side.
scope
Okay.
line
Okay.
item to cover that.
Perfect.
And then the schedule on that would be, if we're good with Structure Point, we'd be going to the resolution, this coming Monday, and then begin design, as soon as possible. Any questions on that one? Okay. Drainage issues, so Monarch Drive, that's the one where, the retention basin in the Lindenbrook subdivision. I've been working with, Hull on that. We've, got a design packet, if you will, ready to go. I'm planning to meet with 3 to 4 contractors, have kind of a pre-bid or pre-proposal meeting, hopefully next week, if possible this Friday, but it's probably gonna be next week. I'd have an on-site meeting with those guys, provide them this detail, and have them give us proposals for that, so that we can get that work going here in the near future. And that's it with that one specifically.
Okay.
Next one, Halloum Lane. I think we had talked in here about different ways to attack that problem. We may have also talked about Bobby Carr, a farmer doing some tile work in the field adjacent to Halloum Lane. He reached out to us and said, hey, I'm doing this tile work, and found while he was doing it that there was a 12-inch drain line running across that field that was previously not specifically known about. Said it was about 1/2 to 3/4 plugged, but still flowing. Offered us a cost for him to replace that as kind of along with the Halloum Lane project, but it was over $20,000 and we needed to go to council for it. So we said, unfortunately, we couldn't make that work on his schedule. He called me back a couple days later and said, hey, this is the right thing to do. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So, you know, I'd like to be a friend of the city. I like the city to be a friend of me. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and hopefully we can just work together in the future, which I think we've worked really well with Bobby Carr in the past. And I told him several times that I appreciated that, and that's his, being a great neighbor, and appreciate that relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I received that call, but quite happy as well.
When was that?
Thursday.
Okay, so that's excellent. How much relief will that give Halloum Lane? Do you think with that small, or is it kind of a wait and see what it actually does?
It's kind of a wait and see, because it's there now. He's gonna make it lower, which will potentially help us out in the future for tying into it. Still no easement or anything like that, but we could always look to go back later and try and get an easement if we do tie into it.
That is fantastic. Thank you note at the very least, I don't know. That's something we don't get very often, so that's nice.
Yes. Let's see, I didn't have anything else specifically with minor drainage issues. I got a number of updates. I can start running through those.
Okay.
Main Street Phase 2, of course that's now open. Punch list is in progress. I think we've got a pretty good punch list. I've talked to a few residents out there. One of the things we're doing specifically is the driveway culverts were put back more or less, I believe, on what was existing prior to the project. The problem that we've had with that is in about 10 locations, I want to say, the ditch got deeper, so it got steeper between the ditch and the edge of the driveway, which is causing some really steep areas. We've had some erosion. Part of that was the heavy rains, but we've decided to extend about 10 of those culverts about 2 to 4 feet to make those more mobile and prevent erosion in the future.
Okay.
So that's part of the punch list. There's a couple residents that came in with that concern, and after looking at it, I agreed with them and thought we should extend those.
And this isn't necessarily part of Mink Phase 2, but I wanted to bring up while talking about Mink, as I was leaving and coming here, the southwest corner of Mink and Cable, right, there is literally right at the corner, there's some kind of a utility box.
I saw that.
Yeah, and it's been crushed, or the cover's off and it's all pushed back and all the wires are exposed, and I don't know what those wires go to, but I hope like somehow in the formation of the city they don't link to my house. So
Those, I believe, are telephone, so that's probably CenturyLink, and they are not the greatest about actually seeming to, how do I say that, to maintain some of their facilities. We'll find phone lines laying on top of the ground, we'll find those boxes just in that kind of condition. So I will see what I can do to, and maybe the cover's laying there and I can just have the guys
Well,
slap
and that-
the cover back on.
maybe. Yeah, at the very least, we need to cover it up somehow.
Okay.
That way,
Yeah, I know there was an accident there at that corner a month or so back, and I don't know if that's what damaged that or not, but.
it would seem that was it was a part of that incident. It looks like something bigger than it came along, so.
Okay. I've got that noted.
Perfect.
Next then, if there's anything else on Mink Street?
No, it's fantastic. And it's really nice if you've had to drive Mink any amount of time before with that railroad.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to go by Leeds the other day, so I was leaving and I went down Connors.
Yes.
And so I haven't gone that direction, and it is nice to cross the road and not feel like you're taking your life. It was like Russian roulette, like, okay, I'll go. Like you had no idea what was coming over those tracks.
Right.
So it is so much safer now. I mean, it has made a huge difference. The speeding is substantial out there. But I have seen some sheriffs
Test it out.
out there quite a bit. Yeah, it's hard not to.
There's no
you-
doubt about it.
You kind of catch you're like, whoa, you know, and then you look up and the police's little flashing speed sign is talking to you. But it is very nice, and it's great that it's open before school starts. It'll be a huge help.
No doubt. The Taylor Road Path Project, punch list work is in progress on that. I haven't heard of any new issues. I think we're in progress on all of those. Specifically, we talked about the safety issues out there, and we have a quote for fencing, which is the first sheet in the packet there. That is to match the fencing that was put in as part of the project, which is some substantial fencing. I was actually in Pickerington over the weekend riding on their trail, and they have the same stuff there. It's 6x6 posts with either 2x12s or 2x10s, 3 rows of those with an angle one. It's very substantial.
It's nice. I mean, it looks really nice. It's apparently
Also has a nice
expensive.
price tag.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't make sense to put in something that doesn't match with everything brand new. And the spots that we've identified, it's not just aesthetics, it's necessary. So, I think it's something that we're gonna have to get done.
Okay, and then the first 200 feet was specifically at that location. The additional 200 feet was some other areas where like, yeah, we should probably put it here too. So that total, I haven't looked at the budget to how we would fit that in specifically.
It's a lot of money. And just as a kind of an overall question with that project, so for some of the things that were put in place to catch, like the runoff and such, like near ponds, like on the trash bags, but it's like the black,
Silt fence.
there you go, silt fence. Do those come up now?
Yes, as
Okay,
part of
so-
the punch list, you wait till you get about 75% ground coverage with grass.
To
and
make
then
sure,
you-
okay, cause that was what I was wondering, how far along and and then the little orange
Yep.
things,
Those
all
will
of
come
those
off
will
as
come
well.
out, okay,
Correct.
perfect.
So I guess as far as the cost for that, I know we have the sidewalks for Oak Meadow, that additional 30,000, which I meant to talk to Jamie about today, but didn't do that, about doing a supplemental for that. I think we talked about that. That is something we could look at to throw on there for the fence as well. There might be some available budget existing. I'll look at that, but if not, supplemental may be the way to go with that to get that fence in. Is there
Okay,
a thought on that?
so if you wanna take a look and see exactly what direction we need to go, cause we need to, both of those things need to be done, the funding for the sidewalk in that, so.
Okay.
Do you anticipate that would be at next Monday's meeting then?
I doubt that we'll be able to get it in time for next Monday's meeting.
Okay, so probably the second meeting in August?
Most likely.
Okay.
We could try for Monday. It's just, I don't know if Jamie would be too happy with me trying to get all that in there.
Yeah, right. Jamie gets paid. Okay.
I did have a couple other updates, just to hit briefly. I think we talked about the impact fees. Of course, that's being handled by the Development Committee. Planning and zoning is kind of playing quarterback on that. And then the service department's doing covering the cost and giving support where we can. So I think that should work out well. Safe travel plan, phase 1 and 2, work started on that last week. They've got the guardrail moved back. I don't know, you may not have noticed, but it's actually not even in places. I've said, hey guys, why did this turn out uneven? So trying to get that resolved and make it nice and level and look good as well as be functional. But that has started. The ramp for this year, concrete work is going to start this week. We'll actually be closing Mill Street between Main and Township, potentially Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, maybe Monday, for them to do that concrete work. They're just gonna do the concrete work and won't be back to do the paving work on Mill Street till after the street fair, so there's gonna be some patches in there and such during that time, but did wanna get them started on that concrete work. Next week, they're supposed to start with repair work on, we marked out Dixon Road and Old Maids last week, and this week I'll be marking out on Headley's Mill for repairs. That should start next week. And then the paving would follow the week after, of course, with construction schedule is subject to change. Oak Meadow Drive, surveyors will be on site this week, and contractors moving in on Monday. They'll start, of course, on Pat Haven Drive, work their way up Hickory, and then do Oak Meadow for the drainage, and then, of course, paving and sidewalks will be towards the end of the project. And they anticipate being done probably sometime in November. And then that's it for updates, unless there was other questions or comments.
Summer's flying, but was it 2 weeks ago we had a Main Street meeting with AEP? Was that before the last council meeting? Have we, like, I'm losing my, I don't feel like we've done an update. I mean, BJ, did we talk about, you were busy, you were gone. But were you guys here, did we have a council meeting shortly after the Main Street update that BJ talked about how AEP came in, we talked about Scary. Have we actually gotten the paperwork from Ivory Barn yet? Are you aware?
DJ has been running
Okay.
on that, and I do not know.
Okay, I'll check with him. Thank you.
So the next would be Public Service Department personnel. We've talked a little bit about this. Of course, idea is currently we have 1 superintendent, 7 operators. Sometimes with all the operators being at the same level, that can lead to issues with you're not my boss kind of scenarios. Of course, we don't really have much of a path for upward mobility for folks. So this would be a solution to some of those issues would be basically adding 1 person, full-time person to the department. So we would go to effectively 6 operators and then have 2 crew leaders. So again, just adding 1 person. And then also looking to add 1 to 2 seasonal employees to help out with things such as traffic control, mowing, and other miscellaneous tasks that would help us get more done throughout the year. One of those happens to be a really good scenario where, of course, Jerry Geiger, who's been here, I think forever, is going to be retiring in the very near future, and he has expressed interest in being a seasonal employee and coming back and mowing. He has a lot of experience mowing. It would be great to transition him into a position like that, somebody that knows what they're doing and knows where all the things not to hit are. And of course, the benefits, it increases our ability to complete more projects, not only the minor projects, but even maybe hit some of these more major projects, take little chunks off of them, like Hilton Lane or Blanche Addition or like Broadway Crossing. Those take up, when we're doing those projects, it takes half the guys or better sometimes to pull on a road. So having additional personnel, we can certainly get more done. I did provide the next 2 things in the packet, next 3 things in the packet. The first is estimated personnel and time requirements and the list of responsibilities. It's kind kind of crude, I guess, a little rudimentary, just kind of trying to summarize at this point what all of our responsibilities are, how many people it takes and how long that takes. I haven't done any math on that yet to really boil that down into man hours, but just trying to get together a list of all the things we do. It's a pretty decent list. I did the crack seal list specifically because there's 18 streets on the list for this year. I was trying to get to dirt patching and other things like that as well, but I haven't been able to put that together yet. I think we've completed 2 things on the crack seal list so far this year, being Mink Street and I don't remember what the other one was. Jason told me this morning, but I know Mink Street was one of them. And then the minor drainage project list, I just started putting this together today. This is the items that are left on my board. A couple of them are fairly major, would take, a week with our guys to do sort of scenarios, some of them a little bit less. There are more than this, and Jason actually provided me a list today. It's almost, doesn't help the argument because we've completed a lot of little minor projects this year, which I'll get that list together and at least provide just for reference with all the things that we have been able to complete. With that position, we're talking about, for the full-time position, how to do that exactly. We discussed the idea of trying to make the crew leader a stipend, just adding pay to a person to be a crew leader. It didn't seem like, after we've vetted that out, didn't seem like a very good idea to do it that way, and actually adding a second position, being that maintenance worker 2, and adding some criteria to that. The 3 criteria we've come up with so far is currently for the maintenance worker, they need a Class B CDL, but we need people with Class A's to be able to pull trailers and such. So the maintenance worker 2 would probably have the Class A designation. We're talking about maybe having them be able to pass a civil service test. Other communities do that, so we've been looking at what those are, what they look like, and potentially having that as a qualifier, as well as the number of years of comparable and relative experience for that position. So.
And including supervisory experience, right?
Ideally, we're hoping to promote from within
Right.
as much as we can. We have one good candidate for that, the other, not so much. So if we, ideally supervisor experience, yes.
So we currently have 6 crew members, or 6 people on the team, but no crew member or crew leaders,
We have 7 crew members and 1 superintendent.
and 1 superintendent. So we would add a full-time and then have 2 crew leaders,
Correct, so it'd be 1 superintendent, 2 crew leaders, 6
6
maintenance workers.
full-time employees. Okay. Well, I would agree with you. I don't like the stipend idea. I like the idea of having a specific job description with criteria that would fit that role, that would justify the increase in pay. I like the civil service test idea and the CDL. There's a lot of moving parts with changing and kind of reshaping. So and we're starting to get on in a time frame of where we're coming up on our budget talks. So it's stuff that we need to start to put together in a way that we could present it to the remainder of council. So if you could start maybe looking at a way to put it into a project proposal maybe, or even ask Scott if he can share the template with you from when he put together all the information for the additional person in planning. And you might be able to move shape some of that to fit this particular scenario.
Okay.
And then based on just how we're growing and everything that's going on, I would leave that proposal open to show where there could be for future growth.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it kind of would help you set up for future staff should we need it. So when you're looking at the big picture, try not to just look at the immediate with these couple of changes. Maybe, you know, saying 5-10 years down the line, and as these projects grow, so this could be built on as we move forward, just to kind of help you so it's already a foundation in place. Does that make any sense at all?
It does, and I appreciate the feedback, and was gonna actually ask for any suggestions on how to create that. It's not something I've really done before, and I don't wanna sound blunt, but I guess in my mind, it kind of speaks for itself. Obviously, the more people we have, the more of these types of projects we can do, and that's why I kind of created the project list. But
Right.
if you have ideas of how I can make that more palatable or sell it better, I'm open to it.
And I think, starting with laying out almost maybe, with what it is currently, a description of, we currently have X, Y, and Z.
Okay?
And then the proposal is to change to this scenario. In order to do that, we need to this. So we would have to create those two crew leader positions, and honestly, if you go into templates and like, Google Sheets and Docs, if you look at their templates or in Word, they actually give really great proposal templates, and it kind of starts popping your ideas off for making it your own. You can be like, oh, mine, and then maybe putting some things together. But it helps so you're not trying to create that, because the challenge that we face is selling this to people who don't understand everything involved in your department.
Right.
And, you know, in the long run, being able to say to our, you know, residents that this is how we based our decision. That it wasn't, there was nothing subjective, that it was in front of us, kind of laid out. And
Okay.
especially when you put all these projects that you have in one column, you have all of your projects on this side, and these are what you could get done with your current staff. On this side, it's what you could get done if you had that set up with different. So you could do a side-by-side comparison, and it doesn't have to be anything too elaborate, but where you can see comparisons, and then ultimately, you know, the cost, of what that would be, because there's gonna be a lot of questions involving that. But the fact that you're already looking at ideas of, the qualifications and job descriptions, I would have that prepared as part of this. That way it can all kind of be looked at the same time. But it answers, by doing all that in advance, a lot of the questions that you're gonna get from council as it comes through. But I think that would help a lot, and if you look for those templates, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Okay. The only thing that sounded challenging in that was the actual providing costs of us versus outside. That would be kind of difficult.
Well, I think
Trying to imagine how to do that.
for us, not necessarily, I wasn't looking for what it would cost from the outside. I'm looking more at how much more could we get done than we are now, and what is the cost of having that additional employee for the city?
Kind of versus the savings that we would have on if we had to outside scope that same work, maybe? Is that-
If you could get that, I mean, if you know, and you might have some of that in work we've already done. You could say, in the past, we've had to pay this and this, for projects we've already had. But, you know, with this position, and I think what is more, for me, sellable with this is that how you're shaping the structure of that department to allow for more stability. I think when you have a couple of people in charge who answer for what does and does not get done, you are more efficient and effective in your day-to-day. So there's not a bunch of finger pointing at each other. Obviously, it stops any squabbling if there is some, you know, about who should do what, but, you know, there's people to hold accountable, and then there's people to manage and track. It just, and it takes some of that responsibility off of you and your superintendent and delegates it down. So I think it's worth it for sure. It's just putting that out in front of people.
A more well-defined chain of command. Very important.
Yeah. And then it helps us build for the future. And it makes us more attractive to stay as an employee here, and, you know, when there is the possibility for upward mobility versus, you know, losing great employees to other cities.
Which we have.
Yes, we have. More than I'd like, so.
Okay. I think that gives me a pretty good, list of ideas and to do on that one.
And if you want me to look at anything or help in any way, just holler,
Okay.
because that's something that I'm good at, so I can look at that stuff and help or whatever.
Okay.
And give you recommendations from somebody who has no clue how to do any of that, so, you know, I could ask you really stupid to you questions that would help you explain it to everybody else, so.
Okay. Well, and marketing and sales is not my forte, so I appreciate that.
No problem.
So, that was,
So then, I think that's it on that one then. Then bridge maintenance is, next.
okay,
So bridge maintenance, had Stone Engineering do a bridge assessment. Now the, ODOT does a bridge inspection, has a bridge inspection program that actually expired this year, but, they sent us an email here recently, and I haven't got any feedback from BJ yet, but, it's free to us. They just do a bridge inspection on all of our bridges, every year for, I think this program's for the next 3 years. So I anticipate coming to council with a resolution, for that. Like I said, it's 100% covered by ODOT for the inspections. They just expect that if they give us something that needs posted or needs immediate fix, that we're going to do that, which is reasonable. However, that list, which is a great thing that they do those inspections and ratings, it doesn't give us any maintenance recommendations or anything to that effect. So that's what I had Stone Engineering do for us. They went and took a look at these bridges and provided us a maintenance, and I didn't bring it down here with me, but a maintenance due on each of those bridges. And I can provide that. It's a report. I can provide a PDF if you'd like to look at that. And then he and I further, the engineer working on this, and I further took that down and are planning to come up with a more or less a CIP list out of that for major, moderate, and minor projects. We've kind of already identified them, give a little bit of a list of years, and tried to assign very rough dollar values to those to start building basically a bridge asset management program. So that is in progress. Next year, Mel and I talked about potentially having a retainer of maybe $5,000 to $10,000 for a bridge engineer specifically. Bridge engineering is not one of the things that I do, so having that person to rely on is very helpful. And they can help us build this maintenance schedule and do inspections and reviews and provide recommendations for what to do and when to do them. So we're trying to build that. That's all specific. Well, there's a little bit more I have on that. Case in point, one of the current issues we have, Headley's Mill Bridge. Well, one of the bridges on Headley's Mill is it's actually 2 culverts. They're 60-inch culverts. They're about 2 foot separation between them. The culverts themselves are in decent condition. They're corrugated metal and have some rust on them. But what we're seeing is, he termed it piping. Basically, in between the 2 culverts is we're losing material. And if we lose that material, we can lose the whole thing. So we're looking at 2 alternative routes on that. One is replacing both the culverts, most likely with a box culvert. If we go that route, it would probably need to be within the next 1 to 2 years to prevent from losing the whole thing. The road has flooded there before, so capacity is probably an issue. We'd probably upsize that. And then the other thing is that the creek has oxbowed back towards the road at that location, which is, I guess I didn't say, it's the just south of Patterson Road, where it's downhill and a curve right as you pass the church. I forget the name of the church right there. But it's right kind of as you get to the bottom of the hill where the creek crosses there. So that's one alternative to replace the whole thing, take care of some of that creek line, kind of push it back away from the road, all as one project, which would be fairly expensive, but we're getting a proposal for at least the engineering and rough cost for construction on that. The other option is to effectively build a new head wall. Just kind of take concrete and dump it around both of those and seal that off so that the water can't get between the pipe. And I guess it'll come down to an exercise in economics. Do we want to do if it's cheap enough to do this where it's going to last for a while, then maybe that's the answer. But if it's really expensive, up to a third of the cost of replacement, maybe we're better off just to replace. So that is in progress. That did come out of this whole bridge assessment thing that, hey, we have a problem. So that's kind of a case in point for that, I guess. But, and I'll have more on the Headley's Mill as soon as I get information.
The one thing that I appreciate and I think we've worked pretty hard on in most of our departments over the past few years is becoming proactive instead of reactive. And I think, over the past it started before my time with the ramp and the roadways. Over the past few years, we've really focused on drainage and feeling like, at least we maybe have a grasp of what's out there and how severe each issue is and how long it would take to fix it. And I think that the bridges are in that same category where we need to be more proactive instead of waiting for something to wash out and fall apart. So and culverts are another thing that's something that I know I personally really appreciate because you guys have caught a lot of things and fixed things before there's been huge problems. Roads are typically not closed as long as anticipated during the repair, so I think that's gone really well. And so the retainer for me, as far as the bridge maintenance, while it's also a safety issue, but it's just another step in continuing to build the programs and being proactive so we can plan accordingly for the CIP and make sure that it'll cost us less money if we can take care of things before they're too bad.
Yep.
So I think that the PDF would probably be good to share. I'm gonna leave it up to you. If you think that's something that you wanna go ahead and share now, or if you wanna wait until you have more of the, outline.
Like the CIP built. I've got it on a PDF, so it's very easy to share with the committee if you'd like to see it, and then just keep you updated when I get more of that built. It's going to take a little time for sure to get that built, so if you want to at least have the.
Well, and I have a feeling that it probably just share it with the whole of council.
Yes.
So maybe once we talk about it at next Monday's meeting, after we discuss it and kind of explain what it is, then you can share it, so
Okay.
you don't get a bunch of questions in advance of that. We can go ahead and talk about it and then share it with everyone, and then,
Okay.
and maybe others will see something that we don't see,
Fair enough.
or, or have an idea we wouldn't have, so.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
Yeah. I'm interested to see that.
Yeah, it was, I glanced briefly, Alan and I met last night, and I glanced briefly at it, and some of the pictures and the things you showed me, I'm grateful that we had that done. So I think that
Yes.
it might have saved us some trouble, so.
So besides the ones that you mentioned on Headley's Mill, are there any other ones that jump out to you?
There is, it's actually another one on Headley's Mill. The deck will need replaced. The window wing wall and the foundation and the footers are all in good shape, but the deck is starting to get some pretty significant rust. It will probably need to be replaced in about the next 5 years, is what they recommend. Beyond that, there's a couple, so those are the two major ones. There's a couple of moderates where some smaller box culverts and such. We've got one that the wing walls are deteriorated pretty bad. A smaller project, maybe in the $25,000 to $50,000 range for everything. So there's two of those. There's one with the wing walls, and I forget what the other one was. And then there's a couple of others that are in the minor category where it's maybe a $10,000 or less fix to some concrete spalling or some channel protection to keep the river headed towards the bridge, sort of thing. So there's a number of things on that list, and we'll say build that and put timeframes and costs to it here as soon as we can. But I certainly appreciate the feedback on that, trying to get from reactive to proactive and be a more efficient and effective management strategy.
I do, I mean, I've been on the street committee for a second now, lost count, exactly the amount of years, but as we've come along, I feel like we've gotten to the point where we are able to plan a little better because we know what we're dealing with versus, I mean, a few years ago, the drainage issues were nightmares and coming at us, and we, had no idea. So I do appreciate that. I think your Department of One up there has done a good job at that, so
Good.
thank you.
We got a long ways to go. We're heading in the right direction.
So any other questions about the bridge thing?
Oh, not the
Oh, no,
first thing.
go ahead. You have something else?
I had texted BJ to ask about the Ivory Barn easement, and he said we have not received it, but he has emailed AEP every single day until they get the paperwork. So he's on it. And another thing that we had come up at the meeting was years ago, it was discussed to have sleeves put over the street fair electric that we use so that those electrical boxes wouldn't look so metal on Main Street. Because we only use them 1 week a year, we wanted to make them look better. One of the things that we talked about, he asked AEP if they could, in all of the work that they're about to do, if they could secure some or give us a road to find some type of a sleeve, and they said they'd never heard of anything like that. So, but I spoke to Andy, and Andy said that he had heard of something that he might be able to find, so.
What? And that's first, just to look better, or
Well,
is
it's
there
to
any
keep
safety
people
issues
out
in
of it also, because it's got the hookup, it's like a camper hookup. And so this would go over and to kind of keep it weatherproof, keep the rust off of it, because it's just a metal box. So if we had some type of hard plastic that sleeve that when it molded over it, it would keep fingers and things up. I mean, it's precautionary, I believe.
Okay,
But anyway, it's something that we're gonna need to continue working on. But anyway,
okay,
update.
excellent.
I did not have anything else.
Thank you.
You guys?
No.
Alright. Nope, well, that's it.
Yeah.
Now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. So moved.
Second.
Second, whatever.
And Carter,
Yes.
Powell.
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Adjourn.
Now,
Yes.
ODOT has a position called a lead worker.